You guys have heard of Patrick Henry, right? Give me liberty or give me death. Yeah, that guy. One of America's founding fathers, and the first and sixth governor of Virginia, thus making his wife, Dorothea, the first and sixth First Lady of Virginia. Dorothea had a prominent family, too. Her maternal grandfather served as lieutenant governor and acting governor of the colony of Virginia before the Revolution, and her paternal grandfather was a commander in the British Navy. She was also the cousin of Martha Washington. All this was seen as a good match for then Governor Patrick Henry. The marriage helped solidify support for him in the Virginia Commonwealth. Let's focus today on Patrick Henry's wife, but not Dorothea. How about his first wife, the one that was kept secret, the wife that was kept hidden away, imprisoned in the basement of Scotchtown plantation, the very plantation home her ghost is said to inhabit? Let's step away from the glitz and glamour history of America's founders and learn about what happened to Patrick Henry's first wife, Sarah Shelton Henry. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. Admittedly, not much is known about Sarah Shelton Henry, and from everything I could uncover, it seems to be intentional. Let's start with what we do know. Sarah Shelton was born in 1738 and raised in Hanover County, Virginia, in the family home known as Rural Plains, though some refer to it as the Shelton House, one of the oldest and still standing homes in Virginia. In 1754, a then 16-year-old Sarah married 18-year-old Patrick Henry. The couple was gifted a 300-acre estate by Sarah's father, but years of drought took its toll on the land and the couple. Patrick Henry eventually gave up on the property, and the couple moved to the Hanover Tavern, which was also owned by Sarah's father. There, Patrick Henry worked as a host, as well as entertaining guests by playing a fiddle. It was at the Hanover Tavern that then 23-year-old Patrick Henry first met 17-year-old Thomas Jefferson, who was on his way to study at the College of William and Mary. Jefferson later wrote that he and Henry became well acquainted, but history shows us that later in their political careers, the two men really didn't like each other, or at least had multiple opposing views. Long story short, there was a time when Jefferson was worried that Henry was making a move to become a dictator while governor of Virginia. Anyway, that's jumping too far ahead for this story. I just point that out to potentially explain why many of Jefferson's writings refer to Patrick Henry as a barkeep, a title that seems to really piss off many of Patrick Henry's earliest biographers. While working at the tavern, Patrick Henry found time to study law, although he admits himself it was only about a month of studies. He eventually turned lawyer, seemingly impressing the examiners with his mind and way of thinking rather than his actual knowledge of law. He was granted a lawyer's license in April of 1760. Patrick Henry gained a pretty large following, which brought in a considerable amount of wealth over time. He began investing in frontier land to further his wealth, and in 1771 he was able to purchase Scotchtown, a large plantation in Hanover County, Virginia. Through all this time, Sarah Shelton, now Sarah Henry, stayed by her husband's side. By this time, the couple had 6 children together. Sarah had been relatively healthy throughout life, but it was after the birth of her last child, Edward, in 1771, that Sarah began to show signs of mental illness. Most historians today agree that this would have been some form of postpartum depression, but of course, at the time, nothing like that was known of. The initial actions or behaviors of Sarah aren't immediately known, but one of the first recorded statements alluding to some sort of mental state shift was in the letter from Patrick Henry's mother to her sister. Mrs. Henry writes, "We feel Sarah is losing her mind after the birth of little Nettie," Nettie being the family nickname for Sarah's last child, Edward. At some point, Sarah's personal doctor recommended that Sarah be moved to the Eastern State Hospital in Williamsburg, the only asylum in the area equipped to deal with mentally ill at the time. History states that Patrick Henry visited the hospital, but was disgusted by the conditions and the treatment of those housed there. Even though the hospital was considered an advancement in treating mental issues at the time, patients were forced bled, dunked in water, and generally overall terrified all the time. Patrick swore that his wife would never be subjected to that type of treatment, so he opted to keep her at home. Although Patrick Henry's intentions seemed to be sincere, Sarah was ultimately set up in a room of her own, confined to Scotchtown's basement, a single servant being assigned to her to keep her company. By this time, Patrick Henry had already become politically active, and he seemed to know that if knowledge of Sarah's condition got out, his blooming career would take a nosedive. Especially since at the time, many people saw mental issues as being possessed by evil spirits. Possibly with that in mind, he had a secret staircase constructed in the back of the house so that he could visit Sarah discreetly. Ultimately, it seems that the lack of historical record is due to Patrick Henry's efforts at keeping Sarah a secret at this point in their lives. It should come as no surprise to anyone that Sarah's condition only got worse. She was said to have turned aggressive, and ultimately was kept in a straight dress, an early version of a straitjacket, to protect both herself and the servant assigned to her. 4 years later, in the spring of 1775, Sarah Shelton Henry died, still confined to her secret basement room. There is some speculation as to whether she passed of natural causes or if it was self-inflicted. It's estimated that Sarah was either 36 or 37 years old at the time. Even this was kept secret. Sarah was buried in secret, and even today, no one knows the exact location of her grave. Historians seem to believe that her grave is only 30 feet from the cellar door at Scotchtown, although I couldn't find what leads them to that thought. With the state Patrick Henry kept her in and his efforts at secrecy, though, it wouldn't surprise me. It seems that it was common in that time frame to secretly bury people with mental issues in an unmarked grave, again due to their beliefs that it was caused by possession. Patrick Henry remarried around 2 years later to Dorothea Danridge before moving out and into the governor's mansion in Williamsburg. As far as Scotchtown, Patrick and Sarah's home, it changed hands a few times until it was purchased by the group Preservation Virginia in 1958. The group then restored Scotchtown and opened it as a museum. The plantation home sat abandoned and deteriorated for many years before Preservation Virginia bought the property. Many in the area say that it was abandoned because of the ghost of Sarah Henry. Mary Adams, who grew up in the house in the 1930s and 40s, claimed to have heard noises during her time there, mostly the sound of chains coming from the basement. She also claimed to have seen a female ghost once in the basement. Even during the time when Scotchtown was abandoned, locals claimed to see flickering candlelight in the windows, sometimes even moving from room to room. They claim paint will not stick to the walls in the basement room that had once been used to hide Sarah Henry away. Even today, curators of Scotchtown report furniture and other decor moving around the house overnight. Things are found out of place the next morning. Police have even responded multiple times to alarms from motion detectors inside the property, but no one is ever found there. One police report even has someone reporting to have seen the figure of a woman in the window. One tour guide has even reported hearing screams coming from the basement. Many accounts say that Patrick Henry and Sarah Shelton were childhood sweethearts, and Patrick keeping Sarah at home showed how much he loved her. This may just be my own speculation, but being a prisoner in a secret basement room and buried in an unmarked secret grave begs to differ. I'm sure Patrick Henry started out with the best of intentions, but then he got involved with politics. It's a tale as old as time. Love can be a powerful thing, but it seems that a lust for power can be even stronger. America in the 1700s and America in the 21st century, it doesn't seem that much has changed.